Newsmax TV's coverage of Super Tuesday 2016 continues. J.D. Hayworth here, thanking you for spending some of this Super Tuesday evening with us. And it's worth reviewing the results. We are seeing the early numbers come in from the Minnesota Republican caucus. And Marco Rubio, who met the press earlier tonight, but has been the subject of much discussion, saying he has yet to win. If these numbers hold up, Rubio could have something to really hang his hat on tonight if he wins the Minnesota Republican caucus. We should stress only 10% of the caucus sites reporting. We do know this tonight. The big winner on the Republican side was Donald Trump, with victories in Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee. Then up in the northeastern United States, Massachusetts, also the Mid-Atlantic in Virginia and in Arkansas. And Ted Cruz came away with 2 wins tonight, his home state of Texas and the neighboring state of Oklahoma. So it has been a very interesting evening, one we will continue to talk about now with a couple of guests who are standing by. One not really a guest, a very familiar face here on Newsmax TV. From Newsmax, New York, the gentleman you see each and every weekday evening at 7 Eastern, Steve Malzberg, host of the eponymously named Steve Malzberg Show. And standing by there very patiently at Newsmax, Washington, the professor of international business at the University of Maryland and columnist Peter Morici. Peter, I want to get back to something you have talked about because it is anathema to many Republicans who embrace the free trade notion, and that is what has been called in the past tariffs. In terms of finding a way to have leverage with nations like China, you say you have a policy that would work that you believe Donald Trump is emulating. Briefly explain it to us and why it would work, Peter.
Well, right now, there's no incentive for China to move off its currency policy. According to the World Bank, China's currency should be trading about 3.5 to $1. Instead, it's trading at more than 6. That creates an enormous advantage and has put millions of American workers out of their jobs. We probably have 2 million fewer jobs because of China. That's quite a bit. They're not going to move off that policy any more than, for example, their policy in the South China Sea if it's costless to them. They maintain huge tariffs on, for example, automobiles. One of the best-selling cars over there are Buicks, but we can't export them from here. We have to make them there, transfer technology to joint venture partners, and so forth. It's real simple. Either they revalue their currency to the World Bank parity of 3.5, or we impose a 50% tariff. If that doesn't work, you raise it to 75%. If I were vice president or secretary of the Treasury for Mr. Trump, I assure you we'd never get to 75%. Because while there'd be a lot of agita among American consumers having to pay more for coffee makers at the Walmart, the people would be in the streets. In China, and the future of the Communist Party would be much at risk. My feeling is if we get tough with the Chinese, and there's a history of this. In the old days, before they were in the WTO, we would threaten them when they wouldn't fall into line, for example, on intellectual property, with cutting off textile imports or making it much tougher. And then all of a sudden, they'd get religion real quick, and laws that weren't enforceable became immediately so.
And let me interrupt right here because I need to explain something because we've had someone else join us. It's our good friend Roger Stone who is standing by via Skype. Roger, you just heard Peter lay out the case for tariffs, and also I think I heard him say Vice President or Secretary of Treasury in a Trump administration. So he's already trolling for a gig. But Roger, earlier today, you were telling us that we've heard from various media sources that you believe Mitt Romney may get into this thing. Do you still hold that opinion tonight, Roger?
Well, it's very clear based on these results that Marco Rubio is done. The Koch brothers induced the billionaire hedge fund manager Paul Singer to put $25 million into Rubio and another $75 million into a Stop Trump campaign. Those ads are very heavily on the air now, radio and television. It appears to have had no effect so far.
No effect.
And Marco Rubio really has to win in Florida on March 15th, his home state, or I think he is entirely done. The establishment now shifts to a different game. Stall Donald Trump short of the magic number to go over on the first ballot. Mitt Romney can still get in the race and run in California, New Jersey, a few other late states in order to keep votes away from Donald Trump. Romney has a ready-made organization. He's the ability to raise money instantly. But again, if Kasich wins Ohio, if now that Cruz has won Texas, it is possible for Donald Trump to still win most of the primaries with a plurality, but get to Cleveland short of the magic number, and that's when the party bosses go to work. That's not the situation you want to be in.
Steve Malzberg, Ed Berliner, our colleague, was on prior to the break, and you may have heard him as you were seated there in Newsmax, New York. Ed is insistent that it's just fantasy, the notion of Mitt Romney getting back into the race. Steve, your assessment of the scenario that Roger Stone just put forth.
Well, I fear that Roger has a point. I think Roger broke the news the other day about what the plan is, and there's no other explanation really for Mitt Romney making a complete and utter fool of himself by doing to Donald Trump and making accusations about Donald Trump, the same ones that were made basically against him by Harry Reid. It's sadly ironic from a very sadly failed candidate who had his chance and totally blew it. But I want to go to what Peter Morici had to say. And I respect the heck out of Peter, but Peter seems all in on getting tough with China and gave the logic behind it and how to do it. But on the other hand, he says that Donald has to drop this notion of a wall when Donald gives basically the same rationale for having Mexico or forcing Mexico pay for the wall that Peter uses for getting tough on China. And that's a severe trade deficit that we have with Mexico. We do great things for Mexico's economy, and they're going to want to keep that and not risk losing it, and they will pay for that wall.
Your response, Peter?
Well, if you threaten them with ending NAFTA, they'll build the wall. I was discussing that with my wife tonight. I'm really disgusted with Vicente Fox. You know, the first time he used the F word, I could forgive it because sometimes on TV we get carried away. And, you know, I mean, he's a very emotional man. But the second time with Maria Bartiromo on Fox, it was premeditated. He did it to show such incredible disrespect. Once again, if I was working for Mr. Trump and I'm not looking for a job, I'm very happy where I am, I'd go down to Mexico and very quietly sit down to Mr. Fox and explain to him that NAFTA means a lot more to him than it does to me. And he better start apologizing and behaving himself and cooperating on immigration. I'm much in favor of shutting down that border, don't get me wrong. But to run around bellicosely saying, I'm going to make them build it, Mexico doesn't even have the money to build it. But there are ways that we can get their cooperation to fix this issue.
Well, we've already visited the fact that those remittances, and Peter, we're in agreement.
Right.
You slap a tax on those multi-billion-dollar remittances, voila, you've got the dough.
Woo.
And also, if you rescind Davis-Bacon and you don't have to pay a false wage on the border, you got a great public works project literally across our southern border. But rather than
JD, there's another option here.
Go ahead, Roger. Sure.
The Chinese corporate tax rate, for example, is 25. Our current corporate tax rate is 35. Now you can see why American companies, huge companies, are doing business in China. Drop ours, as Donald Trump proposes, to 15, and you will bring all those huge corporations and their jobs and their expansion back, and you won't have the deleterious effect that tariffs have on the American consumer. I really think Trump has the most dynamic, pro-growth tax plan, and frankly, I'd like to see him talk more about it. Larry Kudlow, the supply-side economist and Reagan apostle, has been a great proponent of the Trump tax plan. I'd like to see Trump talk more about that, particularly its impact on the minority community, which would be enormous.
And what about that,
by
Steve
the way,
Malzberg? Go ahead.
When Donald says he's going to make Apple, make their phones and computers here in the United States, he's not talking about, dragging them by the hair. He's talking about what Roger's talking about, and he's right. Larry Kudlow, who we had on our show tonight at 7 p.m., loves Trump's economic plan when it comes to how he's going to lower the corporate tax rate and get business back into this country.
Let me turn to you, Peter.
Although I'd say something about Apple.
Go ahead,
Apple's
Peter.
become a Chinese company. I think that I'd ask Apple this. If the Chinese authorities wanted that phone unlocked, I bet you Tim Cook would have done it a long time ago.
And that's the problem.
Unfortunately,
that's
this
the thing,
is an
Peter.
example of what's happened. American companies have become co-opted in China and no longer have a loyalty to the United States of America. It is almost unpatriotic to buy one of these things.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far afield here, but the fact is the Chinese the cost of doing business is to surrender certain proprietary secrets, trade secrets to the Chinese. And you just wonder if Apple,
more than
with
that.
Peter Cook, says all this stuff here in the United States, what technology have they already given the Chinese and really the Chinese government for their advantage that somehow they want to hold out from us? But before we get too far afield, I'm really interested in this, Roger Stone, and that is the whole Romney angle. Doesn't the establishment really risk a backlash because of the frustrations with a guy like Romney and the perception that he kind of says, just let me take a look at the metrics, I'm malleable, I'll change my position, and his failure in 2012? Won't that ultimately inure to Mr. Trump's favor?
Well, it may or may not. Here's the real problem. Many in the Republican establishment would rather have Hillary Clinton than Donald Trump. The problem with Trump, from their point of view, is that he can't be influenced. He can't be bought. He can't be bullied. He is not beholden to the same masters that they are beholden to, the special interests, the lobbyists, and so on. So what we're beginning to see is a very negative trend. You saw this with Goldwater, when the attacks from Nelson Rockefeller and Bill Scranton particularly, and to a lesser degree, George Romney, Mitt Romney's father, so weakened Goldwater, so smeared Goldwater. He was a maniac, JD. He was mentally unstable. He was a neo-Nazi. He was a racist. He was going to start a nuclear war. That's what they did to good old Barry. And now they're trying to do it to Trump, falsely associating him with David Duke, claiming that he is, that he is unelectable, claiming that he is not fit to be the chief executive. That's funny to watch. Marco Rubio, who's never even run anything, talking about a guy who built a multi-billion-dollar company with thousands of employees.
Steve Malzberg, let me turn to you. Go ahead, sir.
When you look at Mitt Romney's trade policy, it was the same, a 40% tariff. When you look at Mitt Romney's immigration policy, it was awful similar. The difference between Mitt Romney and Donald Trump simply, and the tax policy, again, very, very similar. To say he doesn't have a plan, to say that he's some sort of extremist is absurd. The only difference is Mitt Romney is in the game with the Bushes and the others, profiting from Washington, enriching themselves. Donald Trump is not. The difference between the Bush and Obama Treasury Department is the difference between the 5th floor and the 6th floor at Goldman Sachs. They have some bankers with red shirts and some bankers with blue.
A minute left. Go ahead, Steve.
Peter, as a candidate, there's no comparison between Donald Trump and Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney had every opportunity to defeat a failed president, and he wouldn't go here and he wouldn't go there. Why? Because he had the rhino advisors, the same rhino advisors that McCain had, and they fail, and he followed them. Donald Trump will not do that. He will go after Hillary on every single thing she's done and said, and everything. Those women will come forward. The Benghazi parents will come forward. He's going to hold no punches.
And on that note, we won't pull the punches. We just have to pull out the clock. And that 4-letter word time is in the way. Steve Malzberg at Newsmax, New York. Peter Morici at Newsmax, Washington. And Roger Stone via Skype. A very interesting discussion, which we will continue as we continue to monitor the results of this Super Tuesday 2016. We're still waiting on final numbers from Minnesota. And about the time we wrap it up, we will be back with more. We thank Peter and Roger. We'll be looking for you and Steve on the other side of this break.